More on the 564 amendments that have been introduced. Let's turn to Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
Senator Grassley has put in at least 10 of these 564 proposed amendments, and they directly benefit the healthcare industry, all 10 of them. Never mind getting excluded from the center of the supposed bipartisan negotiations about this. How does Senator Grassley avoid being questioned by local police and other officials over large-scale bank robberies or embezzlements or Ponzi schemes around the nation?
Well, I mean, the Republicans are sort of, they're kind of playing two different angles here, right? On the outside, they rail against the bill, they want to kill it, they you know, go along with crazy accusations like death panels, and they say it's a government takeover. On the inside, they're basically, you know, shilling for the insurance companies. And I should note, shilling for the insurance companies is sadly not limited to the Republican Party in this whole sort of affair. But so they're they're banking that no one really is going to take a look at these amendments very close, and if they do, it'll sort of be in the front of their mind for about 2 minutes, and come election time, it's not going to be. So it's this inside-outside game. You know, you say one thing back home when you're in Nebraska, and you do another thing when the lobbyist is at your door and you're in committee markup. And sadly, that's very standard operating procedure for both parties in Washington.
Well, let's see if we can burn that, particularly that Sesame Street one from Hatch, into people's minds. If Senator Hatch believes it's so unfair that the states with the highest insurance costs are the only ones that would be provided with this transition relief, why didn't he just ask for exemption for more than any state with a name that begins with the letter U? Why not just propose to do away with transition relief altogether?
This is really classic. I mean, this is everything you need to know about the Republican Party's philosophy of governance and so-called commitment to small government is embodied in that amendment. It reminds me of back when you know, the omnibus budget bill was passed, and the top people who were bringing home the pork were all these Republicans who were railing against pork. I mean, these guys they're vegetarians between meals. You know, they're constantly saying that, you know, that whenever they can't bring the bacon home for their constituents or the interest groups that are funding them, then they're against spending. But as soon as they get a chance to sort of, you know, smuggle a little in, they're totally fine with it.
By the way, what is the arcana behind the use that the phrase that Hatch put in here, any state with a name that begins with the letter? I mean, I like my stick-up men to address me by name when they hold me up, not just say, hey, you.
I don't know if he's trying to, I don't know if he thinks people are that dumb they won't figure it out, but...
Yeah, and perhaps maybe he thinks we're going to annex Uganda or something.
Yeah, right.
All right. It looks like there are 3 public option amendments among this unbelievable tide of amendments. Are there any odds that any of them will survive markup week?
They're slim. I mean, keep in mind there's 5 bills, right? 4 of them have a public option. The Help Committee bill in the Senate, the 3 that were passed in the House. This is the 5th. This is the only one, if it passes out of markup without a public option, that won't have a public option. The odds of the public option getting into legislation are much better when the bills are either reconciled in the Senate or ultimately when there's conference committee between the House and Senate bills. Right now, there's such conservative Democrats on that Finance Committee. The only way I see a public option getting through is if, in a kind of tactical feint, Republicans decide to vote for it to get it in, thinking that it'll essentially be a poison pill that'll spell the doom for it on the floor of the Senate. Short of that, I don't think it's going to get out of committee.
Yeah, if you don't like sausage. Chris Hayes of The Nation. As always, Chris, great thanks.
Thank you, Keith.